It started with a piano lesson and ended with a silence no song could ever fill. He was 20, full of dreams. She was 42, full of regrets. When Ethan walked into Amelia's house for his first piano lesson, he didn't know that one melody, one forbidden connection, would change both of their lives forever. This isn't just about music. It's about the kind of love that can ruin you and still feel worth it. This is the piano teacher's secret. The first lesson was a quiet October morning in suburban New York, the kind where the air felt heavier with the smell of rain, and the streets were still glistening from the night before. Ethan walked up the narrow stone path that led to a two-story house tucked behind maple trees. He clutched a small folder of sheet music in one hand and a nervous hope in the other. He had read about Amelia Lawrence before, a once-renowned pianist who had disappeared from the concert stage after a sudden personal tragedy 5 years ago. Now she lived quietly, teaching music to anyone who still believed in art more than ambition. When the door opened, the first thing Ethan noticed wasn't her beauty, it was her silence. Amelia stood there in a long gray sweater, her dark hair tied loosely, eyes carrying 1,000 untold stories. She looked at him as if trying to recognize something familiar in a stranger's face. "You must be Ethan," she said, her voice soft yet distant. "Come in." Inside, the house smelled faintly of coffee and dust, the kind of scent that belonged to someone who had spent years alone. The piano stood in the center of the room, a black grand Steinway, polished but untouched. Ethan stared at it in awe, feeling like he was standing before something sacred. Amelia noticed his quiet admiration and smiled faintly. "Do you play often?" "Only on an old keyboard at home," he replied. "Nothing like this." "Then let's start with the basics," she said, sitting gracefully on the piano bench. As her fingers touched the keys, Ethan watched, almost hypnotized. The way she moved, the way each note lingered between her pauses, it felt like music wasn't just coming from her, but through her. He tried to follow along, fumbling a few times. She leaned closer, her hand gently correcting his position. "Relax," she whispered. "Music isn't about control. It's about letting go." That moment lingered. The warmth of her hand, the closeness of her breath. Something shifted. Neither of them said it, but they both felt it. As the lesson went on, Ethan found himself studying her, not as a teacher, but as a person. There was something lonely about her eyes, something unspoken in the way she smiled politely and changed topics whenever emotion slipped through. When the clock struck 1, Amelia stood. "That's enough for today," she said. "You learn quickly. Maybe because you teach well." For a brief second, she looked at him, really looked, and smiled. "You remind me of someone," she murmured. "Someone who used to play with too much heart." He wanted to ask who that was, but she was already walking toward the kitchen. The melody of their first lesson stayed behind, echoing faintly from the piano, haunting, beautiful, incomplete. Notes between them. It had been 3 weeks since Ethan began his lessons. 3 weeks of soft music, gentle laughter, and unspoken tension that neither of us dared to name. He arrived every Tuesday and Friday, always 5 minutes early, always with that same hesitant smile, the one that made him look like a boy who hadn't yet learned how dangerous curiosity could be. At first, it was easy. I told myself I was simply teaching him, guiding him through the same sonatas I had once played on stage. But the truth? He reminded me of hope, something I hadn't felt in years. The mornings before his lessons became the only moments I looked forward to. I found myself wearing lipstick again, opening the windows to let the light in, even rearranging flowers on the table. Small, foolish things. But they made the silence of this house a little less cruel. The unspoken rhythm, that Friday, the rain returned, soft and endless, tapping gently against the windows as Ethan practiced a Chopin nocturne. His fingers trembled on the keys, hesitant but passionate. "You're rushing the middle section," I said quietly. "Let it breathe." He exhaled, started again, slower this time, each note sinking deeper into the air, and then something happened. As he played, I could feel the song talking to me, about longing, regret, time lost. I closed my eyes, and for a second I wasn't his teacher anymore. I was just a woman listening to something beautiful, something she didn't deserve to feel. When I opened my eyes, Ethan had stopped playing. He was staring at me, as if the silence between notes had revealed too much. "You really love this piece, don't you?" he said. "I used to," I whispered, "until life made it too painful to listen to." He tilted his head. "What happened?" "Some stories," I said softly, "are meant to stay in minor keys." He didn't push for more, but the way he looked at me, curious, gentle, unafraid, made me realize how long it had been since someone wanted to know me. A glimpse of the past. That night, after he left, I poured myself a glass of wine and sat beside the piano. The house was quiet again, almost too quiet. I touched the keys, and suddenly the old memories came rushing back, the concert halls, the applause, and Daniel. My husband. The man who once promised to love me forever, but fell in love with silence instead. I hadn't played publicly since he died in that car accident 5 years ago. I blamed myself. I blamed my ambition. I blamed the piano. And maybe that's why I took Ethan as a student. Maybe I wanted to remember what it felt like to guide someone toward light, even if mine had gone out. But what I didn't expect was for him to guide me back to it. The mistake that changed everything. The following Tuesday, he came in soaked from the rain. "You could have waited," I scolded lightly. "I didn't want to be late," he said, smiling through the water dripping down his face. Without thinking, I handed him a towel. When our hands brushed, something electric, something dangerous, passed between us. I pulled away too quickly, pretending to adjust the piano bench. He laughed quietly. "You always run away when things get quiet," he said. "Quiet can be dangerous," I replied. "Not if you know how to listen." His words lingered. He didn't know that quietness had once buried me alive. The song he wrote by mid-November, he brought something new. "I've been writing a song," he said shyly. "Can I show you?" He played it, raw, imperfect, beautiful. A melody full of longing, youthful hope, and something heartbreakingly pure. When he finished, I realized I was crying. "It's not finished yet," he said. "Neither are you," I whispered. He smiled at me, not like a student, but like a man who had found something worth breaking rules for. And that terrified me, because I could feel my walls crumbling, one note at a time. I tried to remind myself he was just a student. I was just a teacher. This was just music. But even the piano seemed to mock me now, each key whispering his name. The moment, everything changed. One evening, after an especially long lesson, the power went out. The rain outside had turned into a storm. We sat there, the only light coming from a single candle on the piano. He laughed nervously. "Guess fate wants us to take a break." "Or test our patience," I said, smiling faintly. He played a few soft notes in the candlelight, and then stopped. "You know, you don't have to hide behind music all the time." I looked at him. The way he said it, quiet, honest, it cut through me. "Ethan, I'm your teacher." "And I'm your student," he said softly. "But that doesn't mean I can't care about you." The silence that followed was louder than thunder. I wanted to stop him. I wanted to remind him of the rules, the years, the distance between us. But I didn't, because for the first time in years, someone saw me. That night, when he left, I stood by the door for a long time, listening to the storm, the echo of his laughter still haunting my walls. Something had changed. We both knew it, but neither of us was ready to admit that the lesson had already turned into something else, something beautiful, forbidden, and inevitable. Autumn leaves and empty desks. The afternoon light spilled across the nearly empty classroom, painting the rows of desks in shades of fading gold. Ethan sat alone, his laptop open, the soft clatter of keys echoing in the stillness. Outside, autumn leaves brushed against the windows, a quiet reminder that another day was ending. He had stayed behind to finish his essay, but his mind wasn't on literature. It was on her, Professor Amelia Ross. She was known for her calm presence and her ability to make even the most reluctant students fall in love with words. To Ethan, she was more than a teacher. She was a mystery wrapped in poise, her every word a quiet melody he couldn't forget. That day, when he noticed the faint light still shining from her office, curiosity pulled him in like a tide. The door was half open. He hesitated before knocking. Inside, Amelia sat behind her desk, her face buried in her hands. Papers, divorce papers, lay scattered in front of her, ink smudged by tears she hadn't meant to shed. When she looked up, startled, their eyes met, hers red but still strong, his full of concern and something he didn't yet understand. "Ethan," she said softly, trying to smile. "What are you still doing here? I couldn't focus," he replied, stepping closer. "And now I see why. You shouldn't be alone right now." For a moment, silence filled the room, the kind that carries everything words can't say. She laughed lightly, wiping her tears. "It's fine, really, just life catching up to me." He wanted to tell her that she didn't have to pretend, that even the strongest people are allowed to fall apart. Instead, he just sat down across from her, the distance between them smaller than it should have been. They talked for hours, about music, poetry, heartbreak, and how life sometimes feels like a book we didn't choose to read. When she finally smiled, genuinely this time, it felt like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. In the weeks that followed, staying late became a habit. Ethan would bring her coffee, and she would read his essays, gently correcting his grammar but never his heart. Their conversations grew deeper, filled with stolen glances and shared silences. The world outside the classroom didn't exist during those moments, until one night it intruded, an email, anonymous, sent to the dean. Rumors spread faster than wildfire. Professor Ross and her student. After hours. Inappropriate. The whispers filled hallways, crawled into classrooms, poisoned everything they had built in secret. Amelia was called into a meeting. Ethan was questioned. The university board demanded answers neither of them could give without losing everything. That night, under the same autumn sky that once felt so warm, they met one last time, in the empty classroom where it all began. "You should forget me," she whispered, her hands trembling. "I can't," Ethan replied. "You're the reason I started believing again." She looked at him with eyes full of love and sorrow. "Then promise me one thing. Don't let this destroy you," he didn't answer. He just watched as she walked away, her silhouette fading like the final page of a story he wasn't ready to end. Outside, the wind carried fallen leaves across the pavement, quiet, broken, and beautiful. The art of keeping. Quiet. The morning light filtered through the tall glass windows of the art studio, spilling warmth over half-finished canvases and jars of paint. The scent of turpentine and coffee mixed in the air, the familiar perfume of creation. Julian stood in front of his easel, brush in hand, but his focus wasn't on the portrait before him. It was on her Miss Bennett, the woman who'd taught him that art was more than color and form. It was confession. She moved between the students, graceful yet reserved, her dark hair tied neatly, her white shirt splattered with paint. Every word she spoke carried weight. Every pause felt deliberate. To Julian, she wasn't just a teacher. She was the first person who ever saw him, not as a reckless young man, but as someone with a soul worth listening to. That day, she stopped beside his easel, studying the painting, a faceless woman standing in a storm. "You're avoiding something," she said quietly. Julian smiled faintly. "Avoiding or hiding?" She tilted her head. "Maybe both." Their eyes met, and in that instant the noise of the room, the chatter, the clinking of brushes, the laughter, disappeared. He looked at her like an unfinished painting, one he wanted to spend a lifetime understanding. After class, the other students left one by one, leaving them alone. The sound of rain tapping against the windows filled the silence. Miss Bennett walked toward the window, her reflection merging with the gray sky outside. "Julian," she said, her voice softer now, You remind me too much of who I used to be. He took a cautious step closer. Is that a bad thing? She smiled at a sad, distant smile. It's dangerous. He set his brush down, the echo of it landing on the table louder than it should have been. Then why do you keep me after class? Her lips parted, but no words came out. For the first time, she looked vulnerable, like someone torn between what's right and what feels alive. I don't know, she finally whispered. Outside, thunder rolled. The lights flickered. A drop of paint slid down the canvas like a tear. That night changed everything. They didn't touch, didn't cross any line. But the silence between them, the way their breaths seemed to find rhythm in the quiet, spoke louder than anything else could. Days turned into weeks. Their late-night art sessions became rituals, two lost souls hiding behind brushes and color. Miss Bennet began to smile again. Julian began to dream bigger. But the walls around their world were fragile, and like every secret painted in the dark, it was destined to be seen. One evening, as they cleaned their brushes, the door opened. The head of the department stood there frowning. Miss Bennet, we need to talk, he said flatly. His eyes shifted to Julian. Now, her fingers trembled. The brush slipped from her hand. The next morning, she wasn't at school. Her desk was empty. Her easel stood covered in a white cloth, as if her presence had been erased overnight. Julian waited for days, then weeks, but she never came back. The rumors said she resigned. Some said she was forced to. No one really knew, but every time Julian painted after that, her voice echoed in his head. You're avoiding something. He stopped avoiding. His next exhibition was titled The Art of Keeping Quiet, and at the center of the gallery, under the spotlight, hung one painting, her face, finally complete, looking out at the world with eyes full of secrets and love that never got the chance to be spoken. The bridge between us, the ocean, stretched endlessly before me that morning, gray, calm, and quiet, like it was listening. After years in the city, I had escaped to this small coastal town in Maine to find peace. Or maybe just to stop running from my past. I told myself it was for the sea air, for inspiration, for silence. But deep down, I knew it was for something else entirely. That's where I first saw him. A young man sitting alone on the old wooden bridge that stretched across the cove, sketching the waves in a small leather notebook. His clothes were simple, his hair a little too long, and his eyes full of the same hunger I once saw in my own reflection years ago. He was sketching me. At first, I pretended not to notice. I stood by the railing watching the tide rise and fall, my hands gripping the cold metal as the wind brushed past. But curiosity won, and I turned to face him. Do you always draw strangers? I asked. He looked up, startled but smiling. Only the ones who look like they're about to disappear. I laughed, a real laugh, one that surprised even me. And what makes you think I am? He shrugged, flipping the page. You have that look, like you're here, but your mind's somewhere else. Maybe that's because it is, I said softly. His name was Eli Turner. 22, a writer struggling to finish his first novel, living in a rented room above the bakery on Main Street. I was 42, recently retired from teaching, recently divorced, and still learning how to live with the quiet. We became friends the way storms begin, slowly, quietly, with something unspoken in the air. We'd meet at the bridge every morning. He'd sketch, I'd walk, and somehow we'd always end up talking. About art, about loneliness, about the people we used to be. I didn't realize how much I missed being seen until he started looking at me. One afternoon, as the sky turned gold, Eli asked, Do you ever regret staying? I frowned. Staying where? In the safe parts of life, he said. In what's expected. His words cut deeper than he knew. Because for years that's exactly what I had done, stayed where I was supposed to. As a wife, as a teacher, as a woman who smiled politely but never asked for more. I didn't answer him. Instead, I asked, Do you ever regret rushing? He smiled faintly. Every day. That night we sat on the bridge under the stars. the sound of the ocean mixed with the soft creaking of wood beneath us. I told him about my marriage, how it ended not with anger, but silence. He told me about his father, a man who dreamed too big and died too early. We shared stories until words turned to silence again, the kind that feels like understanding. Then he said, almost whispering, "You make me want to ride again." Something inside me shifted. I hadn't felt that alive in years, but love, or whatever we were drifting toward, doesn't care for logic. It simply grows in the cracks of what's broken. And soon our meetings became longer, our walks quieter, our goodbyes harder. One evening, it rained. Not the gentle kind, but the kind that soaks you through in seconds. I ran to the bridge, half laughing, half crying, and there he was, waiting. We stood there drenched, both pretending not to tremble. "Eli," I whispered, "this is wrong." He shook his head, stepping closer. "No, this is real." And before I could stop myself, I let him kiss me. It wasn't desperate. It wasn't wild. It was honest. Like two people finally admitting the truth to themselves. When I pulled away, the world felt still. The waves slowed. Even the rain seemed to hold its breath. But the moment didn't last. The next morning he was gone. A note sat on the bridge, soaked at the edges. I had to leave before I ruined the only thing that ever felt pure. Don't wait for me, Amelia. Just remember. The bridge will always remember us. I stood there until sunset, holding that note, listening to the sea whisper secrets it would never tell. And I realized, maybe love isn't about staying together. Maybe it's about finding the person who wakes you up before you disappear completely. Still, part of me hoped I'd see him again, because the bridge wasn't done with us yet. When the tide returns, the sea never forgets. It remembers everything. The storms, the calm, the promises whispered into its wind. I had spent 3 years trying to forget the bridge, the boy with ink-stained fingers, and the version of myself that dared to believe in impossible love. But when the tide came roaring back one cold November morning, so did he. It was a Sunday, gray skies, restless waves, and the scent of rain clinging to the air. I had returned to the coast after years away, older, quieter, and convinced I'd made peace with the past. My hair carried more silver now, my heart more silence. I rented a small cottage near the cliffs, not far from the same bridge that once held my heart captive. I thought I'd be invisible there, just another woman the sea had swallowed. But destiny has a cruel way of folding back on itself. That morning, as I walked toward the bridge, I heard music. Not the radio, not the gulls, but a familiar sound carried by the wind, a piano melody I hadn't heard in years. It was soft, imperfect, alive. And when I reached the other side, there he was, Eli Turner, now 25, standing beside an open piano case, performing for a small crowd gathered on the pier. He looked different, older. His once boyish face had sharpened with time, his shoulders broader, his gaze heavier. But those eyes, still full of the same fire that once burned through me. For a moment, neither of us moved. The music stopped. The crowd clapped politely, unaware that a storm had just reignited between two lost souls. Then he smiled. That same quiet, knowing smile. "You came back," my breath caught. "You never said goodbye." He closed the piano lid gently. "If I had, you would have stopped me." Silence. Not the peaceful kind. The kind that hums with everything unspoken. "I published it," he said suddenly. "The book. The one I told you about?" "I know," I replied, eyes lowering. "It's why I came." His novel had found me by accident. Or fate. The bridge between us, the title read, "A love story about a young artist and a woman who taught him how to see the world again." Page after page, it was us. Every secret conversation, every unspoken feeling. He had immortalized me, not as a memory, but as art. Why? I asked. Why write it that way? "You could have let it die quietly, because you were the only truth I ever knew," he said simply. And just like that, I was back where I started, standing between what I wanted and what I should walk away from. We talked until the sun dipped low. He told me about the book tours, the fame he never asked for, the loneliness fame never fixes. I told him about the years I spent pretending the ocean was enough. Then he asked, "Do you still walk out here every morning?" I smiled faintly. "Only when I can't sleep." He looked at me then, really looked, and said, "You haven't changed." "Neither have you," I lied, because we both had. As night fell, the town lights flickered on. He offered to walk me home, and I didn't refuse. The road was silent, but my thoughts weren't. Every step felt like returning to something dangerous and sacred all at once. At my door, he paused. "Amelia," he began, but before he could finish, I said softly, "Don't, please." He stopped, searching my face. "I wasn't going to say what you think." "Then what?" He took a breath. "I never stopped writing about you." The words landed heavy between us, heavier than the years we'd lost. Then he turned and left, disappearing into the mist the same way he had years ago. Only this time I knew he wasn't running. He was waiting. When I stepped inside, I found something on my doorstep. A copy of The Bridge Between Us, its pages folded and worn. Inside, in his handwriting, were 6 new words. "The tide always brings you home." I closed the book and pressed it to my chest, feeling the echo of waves crashing against my ribs. Maybe love doesn't end. Maybe it just changes its form, from presence to memory, from pain to peace. Still, as I stood by the window watching the tide return, I couldn't shake the feeling that our story wasn't done, because sometimes, when the sea calls your name again, you answer.